Once I had finished my first export of my documentary, I asked for some initial feedback from people in my class. As I was playing it to them, I noticed immediately how crackly the sound was, so I was expecting some comments about the sound. They also commented on the colour contrast of some shots which I'd already spoken about in my construction section. However, they mentioned that one of the shots of outside was really dark, and then it cut to an inside shot which was really naturally bright, and the contrast between the two shots was really noticeable. They also commented on how the titles could be improved. Originally I had the text in the centre of the screen, but it covered the face of my granddad on the photo underneath. Therefore I decided to move the text lower down the screen to the bottom third to ensure that you could see the face on the picture better. After I had adjusted these things, it was then that I decided to tackle the sound issue by importing the sound into Adobe Sound Booth, using the equalizer tool to make the whole sound file one level, and then using the pen tool to draw around the unwanted sound and lowering its levels so that they weren't as pronounced. I then made a second export and played it to my class, asking for feedback, and this is what they said.
Okay, so feedback for Rebecca's documentary.
Emotional.
I quite like with the interviews, it's not just like you're not just on the person, you've actually got like the pictures over the top, and then like the clip of the bust, and it just sort of breaks out. It's quite nice.
Yeah, some real thought gone into the shots as well as the interviews, isn't there? Yeah, they really sort of like, you know, get a sense of like the lives that the people in it are living, and you know, we get a sense of all aspects of it, don't we? Or a lot of different stuff.
It's like really like similar to actual documentaries in the way that like how they're sat and not looking directly at the camera, they're kind of looking to the side, like talking to someone else.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously you've looked at a lot of documentaries to, you know, see the way that they're made and shot, and yeah, very similar. Yeah, and actually that helps with an audience, doesn't it, to watch it. As opposed to someone looking down the camera at you, you feel like you're just observing this life that's going on as opposed to being presented it, which is, you know, sort of different.
I was going to say it does look like something you'd actually watch on TV.
Yeah.
It's not just like a random video. It's actually professionals.
Yeah.
And how it's edited and stuff.
I think that's a really sort of high remark, isn't it? Yeah, it's very professional in the way it's been made and constructed, and it wouldn't feel out of place in terms of alongside those Channel 4 documentaries, I think. Yeah. No.
I think that was spot on, really. Like, I was going to say what Tom said, yeah, you can really see that on what Channel 4. I don't think there's anything to do to make it better.
Okay.
I think it's like how you can't hear you asking questions. So that's really well. So it's like they're just saying it, not like. Did you ask them questions or did they? Yeah, I think it's really well, like how it's like they're just saying it. It's not like an interview. It's just sort of like personal thing. It's really good.
Yeah, and that must have been done through using open questioning techniques. So you've obviously thought about, you know, how do you talk to people so they respond in a way that they say the question in the answers. So that in itself takes time and planning. It's not a case of you just talking to them. You have to kind of, you know, phrase your questions carefully, don't you? Yeah. I think it's really strong. It's really moving. Like Linda said, it's incredibly engaging. And I think a lot of people can relate to it, which is always important with those documentaries. Isn't it? You are showing something really different that people have never come across, or it's something which they can engage with and they can link to. I think slightly. You've done a lot with the audio to fix it.
It's terrible.
No, well, there's little. We always knew that when we play it on the speakers, it would sound slightly differently because, you know, these are more big professional speakers as opposed to a lot of the sounds that we were hearing here. We wouldn't necessarily hear through the television or through the computer when we hear it, particularly those like the bass rumbles, which we can get rid of. But I think your Nan's speech needs to go up a bit in volume. It seemed a bit quieter than the others to me. Just as she spoke, when she first started to speak, I wanted to go over to the thing and put it up. So I would just look at maybe just the level on that. I think all the other levels are fine, and the shots all work really well. And that's the lesser of the two evils with the audio. So the version you showed me yesterday with all the squeaks and pops,
Yeah.
I think it's better to have it, slightly tinnier in its audio, but we don't hear it as it's not
From
as
the other
prevalent.
one, you can't actually quite always hear what they're saying because of the whistle in the background.
Yeah, and that wasn't the case on that one, was it? No. But it's really good. Yeah. Any questions you'd like to ask about it, or
No.
no? Anyone else got anything else to say? No. Okay, brilliant. Well done. Good. Okay. So Tom.
From this, I was really pleased with the feedback I received, but there was only one piece of constructive criticism, so I later went back to Sound Booth and brought up my nan's audio in order to make it at the same level as the other interviews, and so that you could hear it more clearly. Because I wanted to get more feedback, I put my documentary onto YouTube and posted the link onto the social networking sites Twitter and Facebook. I didn't get much of a response except from this. As much as I was appreciative of the comment, I still didn't feel as though I was receiving very much constructive criticism on how I could improve it, so therefore I decided to make a survey online. I used surveymonkey.com to create the survey, and I then posted the survey onto Twitter and Facebook, where I got quite a lot of replies. My questions for the survey were: how did the documentary make you feel? What did you like about the documentary? What didn't you like about the documentary? Do you feel that the documentary could be aired on Channel 4 as part of a 9 PM slot? Do you think the name Lost in Time Living with Dementia fits the footage? What improvements could be made? Please rate this documentary out of 10 for how it deals with the sensitive topic of dementia. Do you feel that the interviews are relative to the cutaways shown? From this, I was really pleased with the responses which I received. I had 14 replies, all of which were very varied answers. From question 1, the general consensus from the answers is that after watching it, you feel sad, emotional, yet very informed of what dementia is, which is what I had originally wanted to do when I had first started my research. From question 2, it is clear that people liked the pace of my clips and that the narration was very clear. Many people commented on the fact that there are interviews with different sides of the family to give a different representative view. One person mentioned that they liked the fact it shows first-hand cases of dementia to make it more realistic for the audience, and another said how thought-provoking it was, and that it appears of a professional nature. Question 3 has taught me that there is still a few little cracks in my sound, but it isn't as recognisable to the audience anymore. One person has put that they didn't like some of the titles. I'm not really sure what this means because they haven't gone into any more detail and the survey is anonymous. However, I'm pleased with my titles because they are consistent all the way through and they conform to the codes and conventions of documentaries anyway. One person wrote that it was too short, but in this aspect I met the requirements of the brief as it had to last approximately 5 minutes. One comment which I liked from this question is that someone said that it only touched upon vascular dementia rather than all of the different types of dementia and Alzheimer's. So perhaps if I was going to do this again, I would interview more people who are experiencing different kinds of dementia and I could focus on dementia as a whole, as opposed to just one part of it. From question 4, a lot of the responses were a yes, which I was very happy with because it is Channel 4 that I would want to air the documentary on at a 9 PM slot after Watershed. Many people commented saying yes if it was longer, but I think that's because I didn't write in the question that it's only an extract for a documentary. One person wrote how they agree that the post-Watershed time is appropriate as it would enable the documentary to focus on the adults more and it would enable me to include more emotional footage, so I'm glad that the audience agree with me. Question 5 was a general consensus of yes, that the title Lost in Time Living with Dementia is very appropriate, so I was really happy with that. From question 6, what improvements could be made? I had several good responses. The first being about the sound in some places a little distracting, but other than that, it's very clear and easy to understand with a clear voiceover. Also, the quality of the opening shot. One person mentioned perhaps using a tripod instead of a handheld camera for this. So if I was to do it again, I would use a tripod for this shot, as it is quite shaky. However, at the time when I was filming it, it was quite busy as it was near Christmas, and it would have been quite awkward having a tripod in the middle of a busy city. But if I was to do it again, I would use the tripod for the opening shot to make sure it's more steadier and clearer. Another person suggested perhaps including more members of the family, so I could perhaps include more family scenes of more people showing what it's like of a struggling nature. Someone put they would have liked it to be longer, but for the purpose of the brief it can only be 5 minutes anyway, so obviously if it were a real documentary and I would be airing it on Channel 4, then it would be longer. I feel the best response for this question was that it could have maybe included interviews with nurses, carers or doctors. I really liked this response. At the beginning of my planning I had wanted to include an interview with someone within the profession, but I changed it to more family members as I thought it would create a more emotional style of documentary, which I feel in the long run it did. However, if I was to do it again, I would probably include a short interview with someone of this background in order to make the documentary seem more professional. And if I was to lengthen the documentary, then I would include interviews with this type of person anyway and show more of the dementia at hand. From question 7, I asked to rate the documentary out of 10 regarding how it deals with the topic of dementia. I received 8 10s, 2 9s, a 9.9, 2 8s and a 7. I'm really happy that all the answers are above 5 because it shows that I've met my original aims for the documentary, as I wanted to focus it on dementia in a professional and sensitive way. From question 8, I had one person skip the question and one person say they don't know what a cutaway is, but other than that, people said that they are very relevant to the interviews and voiceover and support what's being mentioned, and others say that they flow very well. From my audience feedback for my documentary, overall I'm really happy with people's positive comments about my work, but thankfully some people have given me some constructive criticism. Therefore, if I was to do the project again, I'd include more shots of the dementia at its worst, so it gives a bigger impact to the audience. I would also include interviews of people within the medical industry who could give a professional opinion of dementia and explain specific reasons behind it. I would also redo my opening shot with a tripod so that it was steadier and clearer. Regarding my sound, obviously it's not perfect, but I'm happy at how I've dealt with it and tried to resolve the issue by adding a music track, including oral bridges, by adding fades to the beginning and ending of sound, and by using sound booths to try and level it out. Overall, I'm really happy with how it sounds now, but obviously if I was to do it again, I will have learnt from my mistakes and tried to prevent it from happening in the first place.